Up until 1987, the design for action games had been laid out pretty well. You played the lone hero, your country's last best hope against a terrifying army of soldiers. Your only friend was your gun. Your only way through was to defeat in combat every last one of your foes. It was in 1987 that Konami's rookie designer, Hideo Kojima, decided that he wanted to make a different action game, one that hinged around the idea that a lone soldier must first rely upon his wits, his resourcefulness, and his ability to remain undetected. His gun was a last resort. Thus became the pillar concept behind the Metal Gear franchise and the credo of its revered hero, Solid Snake. Solid Snake wasn't always the tough-as-nails soldier we've come to know him as. The first mission, which was released on the MSX2 home computer system in Japan and later on the NES, saw him a green soldier, fresh out of training and sent behind the enemy lines to infiltrate a fortress in southern Africa called Outer Heaven, to rescue that operative, Gray Fox, and discover the meaning behind his only transmission, Metal Gear. As would become tradition in the series, he was dropped behind enemy lines with no weapons and no equipment other than a pack of smokes and would have to sneak his way past sentries in order to infiltrate the fortress. He wasn't completely alone, however. At any time, he could contact his commanding officer and a number of operatives by radio for support or tactical advice at any location. The action took place in a 2D top-down world, which gave you a good tactical view of your enemy's movements. Some of the equipment Snake would procure along the way would become longtime staples in the series, such as mine detectors, gas masks, key cards, rations, binoculars, and everyone's favorite, the cardboard box. Additionally, it established a few key characters that would play long-standing roles in the Metal Gear canon. Most prevalent of these is Big Boss, your commanding officer who later you find out to be behind the terrorist movement. Gray Fox, the operative you were sent in to rescue, also went on to become a long-standing character. Ultimately, it provided a truly unique gameplay experience that would nearly a decade later cement into a completely new subgenre of action gaming. 3 years later, in 1990, the Metal Gear franchise split into two distinct directions. In Japan, Hideo Kojima released Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, again for the MSX2 home computer system. In the US, Snake's Revenge was released on the NES, but has next to nothing to do with the overall story arc of the series other than it starred the series hero, Solid Snake. The gameplay was much more action-focused, had some side-scrolling moments, and is generally regarded as the black sheep of the Metal Gear family. Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake was a very different story. It told the story of Solid Snake's sophomore mission, which took him to Zanzibar land in the Middle East in order to rescue the kidnapped Dr. Keo Marv. Dr. Marv had developed a microorganism called Olix, which could refine crude oil, making it a valuable asset in the world's increasing oil crisis. As fate would have it, Gray Fox, operative Snake rescued in his last mission, happens to be the leader of the military force at Zanzibar, along with Big Boss, who incidentally survived his last encounter with Solid Snake. Additionally, this time around, Snake would have to fight Metal Gear, the nuclear-capable walking tank from which the series gets its name. Despite advancing the story, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake didn't do very much to evolve the gameplay. Regrettably, the events that took place in Metal Gear 2 is a story that would never be told to most North American Metal Gear fans, but at the very least, they would be referenced at length in the games to come. As it turns out, nearly a decade would come to pass before Metal Gear would resurface, but fortunately for the staunch fans of the series, the wait would be well worth it. In 1998, Konami and Hideo Kojima released Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation. While it consisted primarily of the same classic top-down stealth espionage gameplay, it took advantage of the technology of 3D graphics to enhance the experience. This enabled Snake to have a few new moves, such as being able to crouch and crawl under objects and through air ducts, as well as heightening the immersion by letting you see the world through the eyes of Snake himself. Moreover, the increased storage capacity of the dual CD game allowed for a truly cinematic experience. This would mark a very drastic change in the series. From this point forward, the Metal Gear Solid games would carry the reputation of having the player watch the game nearly as much as you played it. Kojima's multi-layered labyrinthine stories would now be told through action movie-style cutscenes portrayed by a skillful cast of voice actors. Metal Gear Solid would also introduce a number of memorable characters to this canon, such as Hal Emmerich, the chief engineer of the Metal Gear Rex project, as well as Revolver Ocelot, the six-shooter favoring military leader who will come to play a major role in games to come. Right around the same time, Konami released Metal Gear Ghost Babel for the Game Boy Color. While it was released in North America, it arrived with little impact or fanfare. It followed the story of Solid Snake returning to the former site of Outer Heaven to investigate the disappearance of a hijacked cargo plane containing nuclear weapons and a new Metal Gear. While the gameplay closely resembled that of the original Metal Gear game, its story was just as complex as any of the modern games, giving a few extra levels of depth to everyone's favorite expert, tactical espionage. The wake of Metal Gear Solid made a huge impact. Metal Gear had finally gone prime time. At E3 of 2000, Konami released a trailer for Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. The production of this trailer was unlike anything the video game world had ever seen. It resembled a trailer for a blockbuster Hollywood movie in every conceivable way. With tense action cinematography, the boastful orchestra theme composed by Harry Gregson Williams, right down to the written and directed by Hideo Kojima's splash at the end. Kojima wanted to make one thing clear: he was rewriting the rulebook on interactive movies. The backlash of this trailer was near immeasurable. No one had seen a game given this Hollywood-style treatment before. It took the already dedicated Metal Gear Solid fan base and turned it rabid, creating unprecedented level of anticipation for the game's release in November of 2001. However, no one could predict the fan reaction when the game finally hit shelves. The game in many ways alienated a number of the fans that it had generated through the trailers that had heralded it. The game began with Solid Snake, now a freelancing mercenary, infiltrating a cargo ship after receiving an anonymous tip that it was carrying a new version of Metal Gear. Solid Snake completed his mission with relative ease, and the story continues forward 2 years later, leaving the player in control of a whole new character, Raiden. Raiden played exactly like Solid Snake, but he just didn't have the same appeal. He was doubtful rather than confident, curious instead of bold, and simply was not the character that the Metal Gear fans had waited 3 long years to play. Once fans realized what was going on, many felt like they had been tricked by designer Hideo Kojima himself. Additionally, while the cinematic cutscenes were more dramatic and beautiful than ever, they were long-winded and wove a story that was too complicated for its own comprehension. The gameplay was as great as it ever has been, with outstanding graphics and a painstaking attention to detail. But the surprise character as well as the confounding story soured many gamers to the series as a whole. Some may say that half of the fun of the Metal Gear game is the anticipation of the next one. And in the aftermath of Metal Gear Solid 2, only one thing is clear: all bets are off. At E3 2003, Konami revealed a trailer for a new game in the series, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. The trailer offered an exciting glimpse of an all-new type of gaming. Long gone was the panache of a postmodern techno thriller, replaced with a Cold War-era jungle stealth mission. Kojima intends to interject new gameplay along with this new era, using heavy undertones of camouflage and survival-based espionage. While there's a lot of curiosity about how these will work into the game, the biggest question on everyone's mind is who the main character is going to be. The first trailer scene of the game assured that only Snake is the true hero. The 1960s setting makes it impossible for it to be the Solid Snake fans have come to know and love. Those who follow the Metal Gear lore rigorously know that Solid Snake is the genetic clone of his original commanding officer, Big Boss, making him the most likely suspect. There's been some suggestion that this will be the final Metal Gear game, and that Kojima intends to wrap up all the loose ends of the series with this one single game. This is a pretty tall order considering at the conclusion of Sons of Liberty, he added a plot twist that spanned an entire century's worth of events. What is known of the plot covers a number of consistent themes, such as the rescue of a kidnapped scientist, the betrayal of a commanding officer, and a cast of some of the craziest boss enemies this side of the X-Men. While the fan base is smaller now than it was for Sons of Liberty, those that remain are no less rabid and eagerly await what could be the final chapter of the Metal Gear saga. At this point in time, the future of Metal Gear is uncertain. While it's assured that a strategy-based game titled Metal Gear Acid will arrive on the PSP, it is unsure if there will be more additions to the Metal Gear Solid franchise with or without Hideo Kojima. Over the years, however, Solid Snake has easily become one of gaming's most recognized characters, and the impact of Kojima's unique take on action gaming can be seen everywhere. Countless clones have appeared over the years, and nearly every action game made recently uses a stealth mechanic at some point. Whether you are a fan or a naysayer, standing at the epicenter of hype or watching from the outskirts, the impact of this series is undeniable, and its rumblings will be felt for many years to come.